The wind howled across the cracked, sun-scorched plains of West Texas, carrying with it the faint jingle of spurs and the low moan of a man too stubborn to die. They called him Big Jack Ramsey, the giant cowboy, a towering figure whose shadow stretched longer than the Rio Grande at dusk. At 6'7", with hands like iron skillets and a heart too big for his weathered frame, Jack was a legend in Dust Bowl County. But legends, as Jack learned that blistering summer of '92, aren't born from easy trails. They're forged in the crucible of the impossible, where hope is a flicker, and giving up is a choice you spit in the face of. That summer, Jack faced a storm no man could ride, a dying town, a broken promise, and a boy who believed in him when no one else did. Dust Bowl County wasn't much to look at anymore. Once a bustling hub for cattle drives, it had withered under drought and despair, its main street lined with boarded-up shops and dreams gone to rust. Jack's ranch, the Lazy R, was the last holdout, a sprawling spread of stubborn hope where he raised longhorns and memories of better days. At 42, Jack was a widower, his wife, Ellie, taken by illness 5 years prior. Her absence was a wound that never closed, but Jack poured his grief into the land, into the cattle, into the belief that hard work could keep the world turning. The townsfolk loved him for it, his quiet generosity, the way he'd slip a 20 into a struggling family's mailbox or haul water for a neighbor's parched fields. But love doesn't pay bills, and the bank was circling like a vulture, ready to foreclose on the Lazy R. The trouble started when the county's only water source, the Red Creek, dried to a trickle. Without water, the cattle withered, the crops failed, and Dust Bowl's heartbeat grew faint. The town council, a gaggle of tired men in sweat-stained suits, proposed a desperate plan, a pipeline from a distant reservoir, 50 miles away. It'd cost a fortune, more than the town could scrape together. The bank offered a loan, but the terms were brutal. Every rancher, every shopkeeper, would have to sign over their deeds as collateral. If the pipeline failed, Dust Bowl would be auctioned off to the highest bidder. Jack, the only man with enough land to tip the scales, was the linchpin. He stood at the town hall meeting, his Stetson casting a shadow over the room, and pledged the Lazy R, "We're family here," he rumbled, voice like gravel and thunder. Family don't let family fall. But the pipeline was a beast. The terrain was unforgiving, rocky hills, sinkholes, and stretches of quicksand that swallowed equipment whole. The crew, a mix of locals and hired hands, worked under a sun that broiled their skin and spirits. Jack was there every day, swinging a pickaxe, hauling pipe, his massive frame a beacon of grit. He'd crack jokes to keep the men going, share his canteen, and work double shifts to cover for those too weary to continue. Yet, 3 months in, the pipeline was only half built, funds were dwindling, and whispers of failure spread like wildfire. The bank sent a slick suit named Carver to assess progress. Carver's smirk said it all, he was betting on foreclosure, already tallying the profits. Then came the boy. Tommy Delgado, all of 12, scrawny as a fence post, with eyes too big for his face and a limp from a tractor accident that took his father 2 years back. Tommy's mother, Rosa, ran the diner, barely keeping it afloat. Tommy idolized Jack, trailing him like a shadow, asking questions about roping and riding, calling him Mr. Giant. Jack, gruff but kind, would ruffle Tommy's hair and say, "Kid, you're tougher than a longhorn's hide." Tommy's belief in Jack was unshakable, a light in the dust-choked gloom. One evening, as Jack sat on his porch, staring at the stars, Tommy showed up with a jar of nickels and dimes, his life savings. "For the pipeline," he said, chin high. "I know you'll finish it, Mr. Giant." Jack's throat tightened. He tried to refuse, but Tommy's eyes held a fire that shamed his doubt. He took the jar, promising to make it count. The impossible struck at dawn. A sinkhole, hidden under a thin crust of earth, swallowed a bulldozer and 2 tons of pipe. The crew stood stunned, their morale crumbling like the ground beneath them. Carver arrived, clipboard in hand, declaring the project unsalvageable. The bank would pull funding by week's end. Jack felt the weight of every eye on him, ranchers who trusted him, families who'd bet their futures on his word. He wanted to roar, to tear the earth apart with his bare hands, but all he could do was stare at the gaping hole, Ellie's voice echoing in his mind, "You're strongest when you're kind, Jack." That night, alone in his barn, he broke. He sank to his knees, whispering to her memory, "I can't do this, Elle. I'm not enough." But dawn brought a shift. Tommy appeared, dragging a rusted wagon filled with shovels, ropes, and a hand-drawn map labeled, Plan To Beat the Hole. The kid had spent all night sketching, plotting a detour around the sinkhole based on stories his dad used to tell about the land's quirks. Jack stared at the map, then at Tommy's determined face, and something cracked open inside him, not despair, but defiance. He rallied the crew, Tommy's map in hand, and they set to work rerouting the pipeline. It was grueling, days of blasting rock, nights of hauling dirt under lantern light. Jack worked alongside them, his giant frame a constant, carrying beams when machines failed, pulling men from exhaustion with his booming laugh. Tommy was there too, fetching water, cheering, his small voice cutting through the din, "We're gonna do it, Mr. Giant." The bank's deadline loomed. Carver returned, expecting defeat, but found a crew reborn, driven by a boy's faith and a cowboy's heart. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Rosa, Tommy's mother, revealed she'd been quietly rallying the women of Dust Bowl. They'd organized bake sales, sold quilts, even pawned heirlooms, raising enough to cover one last shipment of pipe. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. Jack, hearing this, felt a surge of shame. He doubted, but the town hadn't. They believed in him, in each other, in the impossible. He climbed atop a crate, voice shaking, and said, "This ain't my fight. It's ours. Let's finish it." The final stretch was a brutal sprint. The crew worked through a sandstorm, eyes stinging, hands bleeding. Jack and Tommy took turns at the front, Jack wielding a sledgehammer, Tommy marking the path with chalk. On the last day, with the sun sinking and Carver's deadline ticking, they hit water, a gush of clear, cold life from the reservoir. The pipeline held. The crew roared, hugging, crying, as water flowed toward Dust Bowl. Jack lifted Tommy onto his shoulders, the boys' laughter ringing like church bells. Carver, silent, slunk away, his clipboard useless. But the true climax came that night. The town gathered at the Lazy R, lanterns glowing, as water reached the fields. Jack stood before them, Tommy at his side, and tried to speak. Words failed. Instead, he knelt, handing Tommy back his jar of coins. "You saved us, kid," he said, voice breaking. Rosa wept, the crowd cheered, and Jack felt Ellie's presence, warm as the Texas sun. The town wasn't just saved, it was reborn. Fields would grow, shops would reopen, and Dust Bowl would breathe again, because one man refused to give up, and one boy refused to stop believing. Jack never called himself a hero. He'd say it was Tommy, Rosa, the crew, the heart of a town that wouldn't break. Years later, when Dust Bowl thrived, folks still told the story of the giant cowboy and the boy who gave him his strength. It's a story of kindness, of selflessness, of humanity's stubborn will to rise. And it reminds us all, when the impossible looms, you don't need to be a giant, just a spark of compassion, a hand to lift another, and the courage to keep going. Because in the end, it's not the size of the fight that matters, but the size of the heart behind it.